Hey everyone, it's Thobekile here, and this video is all about knowing and understanding your triggers. I know most of us, we do have, bad days every now and again, but I'm not quite sure if all of us really do understand what normally causes you to have a bad day. So I am going to be shedding a bit more light on that, and by explaining to you guys my three main causes, for me to have a bad day. So let's get straight into the content. The number one reason for many of my bad days is ignoring my spiritual life. I'm sure many of you ladies out there can relate with the fact that, the many roles that we play, comes with their own demands and challenges. And for me, most of the times, when I am centered, when I am grounded in the word and in my fellowship with Christ, and I'm feeding on him and I am constantly nourished in the word, I find there's a certain grace, there's a certain poise, that I normally face through all the things that I have to do, be it at home, with my work and things like that. I find there's so much strength, like I have a reservoir, right, to draw from. But, life happens, and there are seasons where I find I'm not really getting the nourishment. It's either I'm just rushing through my devotion, or I'm failing to actually slot in the quiet time, that normally feed me. So I find that, in those seasons where I'm not grounded, when I'm not centered on the word, on who I really am, because my spirituality is like a big part of who I am. So if I'm not grounded in that, I find I am so easily just set off. Sometimes, small things that I would normally handle, they, especially when it comes to my thought life, I'm not as disciplined, in my thought life as I am, when I'm grounded in the word. So I find that lack of spiritual nourishment is really a big factor in many of my bad days. It's an underlying theme. If I can trace back to any day, I can see that, I haven't been really in the word. And by the way, if you're going through those cycles that I'm talking about, where 1 week you're on fire and you're putting in all the time, the prayer and everything, and the other time you find yourself, falling short. I used to make this mistake of, sometimes really being disappointed or feeling guilty. But I later understood that, I should look at those seasons where I am down or I'm not putting in my time, as a signal that, I'm spiritually malnourished or I'm spiritually deficient. And that way the solution is just getting back to my routine and getting back to, hearing the word, getting back to feeding on Jesus, instead of me, being feeling guilty and condemned. It doesn't really help in any way. So if you're in the season, just get back, recognize, where you are and reestablish whatever routine, by changing things around in terms of, your schedule and putting in that time. And yeah, we're off to more good days than bad days. The second reason for many of my bad days is, focusing on the wrong things. You see, I've realized that, what I choose to set my mind on, what I choose to focus on is very key. On those days or seasons where I am self-absorbed, I am self-centered, where it's all about me and, what I want, what I need, and how unfairly I'm being treated, or how things are not working out for me. I find on those, when I choose to focus more on those things, things don't really work out very well for me. I heard actually someone saying that, if you are wrapped up in yourself, you make a very small package. So one thing that I've realized also is that, when it comes to bad days or triggers or reasons for many of our bad days, they're not really, unique to us. Many of us go through these things. But when I am very focused on myself, somehow I convince myself that, I am having the most terrible life, or, things are just not working out for me. And I tend to, just over-exaggerate the situation and blow it out of proportion and just make it bigger than it is, and even worsen the whole my mood and have the terrible day. So it really doesn't really help. So it's not just about focusing within that I find is a problem. I think also focusing on other people really is a sure way of getting in that ditch as well. So especially in the social media world, guys, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, we don't really need to explain that much, but you know, it's not like we get on social media to, you know, have a lousy day, but sometimes if we hang in long enough and focus on more on other people's highlights and their glamorous life, it's easy to find yourself, you know, now having a bad day or feeling like, you know, your life is not as fancy enough, or you know the thought trail. You know, sometimes this focusing on others can be so subtle. I remember this other time when we went for, it was just like a 1-hour tour into some caves, and you know, we were with this family. You know, it was a very nice family, and you know, they were slightly you know, older than us. I think maybe they had like 10 years on us, so their kids were slightly older, but they looked so like a very nicely neat family. You know, the mom and dad like all lovey-dovey. They were just like a perfect couple in a perfect family kind of setup, and it was so inspiring hanging out with them, you know, in the early stages. But I think the more I spent time, observed them, something about just focusing more on them, I think I started either to want what they had or something. But I remember that by the time we drove home from this tour, my daughters actually had to ask me like, "Mommy, you're no longer chatting with us," because they normally like to play games. "What's going on?" And it was in that moment that I realized that, you know what, I think I focused more on what they were doing, what they had, and that I actually lost track. I was about to get myself into that bad mood and just thinking, oh, you know, my family is dull or boring or whatever. I don't know what was going on, but you know, I'm just thinking it was just that in that moment that, you know, it's a subtle thing that happened, but you know, it was a precursor to me having just a terrible weekend. But thank God, I did manage to catch myself. You know, I think I kind of lost 2 hours in that drive, but you know, by the time I got home, I think I was a bit better. But I'm just saying that, you know, it's those small things on choosing to focus on the wrong thing that can really make us have a bad day. I mean, had I not, you know, paid attention to that trigger, I could have actually gone through, you know, like a weekend, you know, having such a terrible, miserable time, but not knowing what really caused it. And the more I made that adjustment in my thinking, you know, that's when I just started saying, you know what, I'm sure that family, for them to be who they are, they have tended their garden, you know, they've put in the work. Maybe I should also put in my work into my own marriage, into my own family, so that, you know, I don't have to envy or wish for what another person has. Sometimes bad days can be triggered by some, you know, physiological processes or even physical reasons. And for me, a lack of rest or inadequate sleep always gets to me. I love my rest. I love to relax, you know. So when I am not adequately rested, I always feel, you know, like I don't have the same emotional stamina. I don't have the same emotional reserves. You know, it's so difficult to focus. Sometimes, you know, I can just be on the edge, or, you know, can be ticked off easily, you know. And so I find that lack of rest or inadequate sleep always gets to me sometimes. And so most of the times when I don't sleep very well, I always find it sometime in the day, you know, to just slot in that 20-minute or 10-minute power nap to just get myself, you know, the enough reserves for me to power through my day without really causing everybody else, you know, to making everybody else walk on eggshells around me. So the other thing is that, you know, I remember after I gave birth to my girls, you know, I would have this deep depressive moods just before my cycle, and I noticed this trend and I started anticipating, you know, that, and I worked around it by just scheduling all my me time activities round about then, and in a way it really did help me counter, you know, me having those 2 bad days before that, because they were sort of like predictable. And that's why it's so important for us to get to understand, get to know our triggers, so that, you know, we can work around them, you know, or we can anticipate them. We can be on guard, we can be alert, and not every bad day, not every trigger really needs to cascade into a full-on bad day. So that's why I thought I should share with you guys my top reasons for having my own bad days, and I hope it got you, you know, thinking about your own bad days, and, you know, understanding what is your own theme and how you can work around it. The more you understand your own reasons, the easier for you to catch yourself in the early stages of you having a bad day. And the other thing is that if you actually pinpoint exactly what is causing you, you are able to adjust yourself accordingly. It's one thing to say, you know what, I feel awful today, you know, or I just feel horrible today. But it's another thing to say, you know what, my mood today, I'm being snappy, you know, maybe because I didn't get enough rest today, or, you know, I haven't been joyful, maybe because I have not been spending enough time in the Word. You see, by just pinpointing exactly, you know, what your reason or your cause is, you give yourself, you know, something to work with, and you know, the more you actually can bounce back, you know, faster from your bad day, and more about bouncing back, you know, in the video that will follow. Otherwise, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in on this one. I will see you in the next.